Good morning, my beautiful friends. Happy Easter. If you're Christian, you'll often hear the phrase, He is risen. Then your response is, He is risen indeed. And that's a great thing for Christians. So Easter has always been my favorite holiday because it is the holiday that defines Christianity, right? So Christmas, beautiful holiday, but great people are born every single day. And it's great to have a remembrance of a great birthday, but Easter is the day that makes us Christian because Christ was crucified and then he rose again from the dead at Easter. So even if you're not Christian, this channel is for everybody. We're inclusive here. I want to talk about the sort of ceremonies that happen, the rituals that happen over the Easter, the Holy Week, starting on Maundy Thursday and ending today on Easter. And I think they're interesting because if you're not familiar with a Christian tradition, or at least my version of it or whatever, it might seem a little silly, what happens, but I think these kind of rituals and practices happen in a lot of different religions and practices, pagan practices, in Wiccan observances, witchcraft observances, right? Other faiths, right? So taking all the judgment out of whatever you believe, because whatever brings light and love into this world is a good thing, right? So things start up in Holy Week on Maundy Thursday, and on Maundy Thursday, that's the day that the Last Supper is held, or that's the day that we remember the Last Supper being held. And so Jesus has everybody over, and they're in this room, and he knows that this is the last time they're going to break bread together. This is like, he knows that this is the last time they're going to have dinner, and he tells his friends that. He's like, look, things are going south. This is it, right? So just, remember this. Remember this night. Remember these things. And, the apostles, kind of don't take him all that seriously, and Jesus like, well, one of you is going to betray me. And they're like, no, I'd never do that. And Peter, you're going to, forget about me. You're going to deny me 3 times. No, I never do that, Jesus. You're worrying about nothing. And Jesus knows what's coming. Like, he knows what's coming. But his friends are, drinking and having a grand old time. And Jesus says, hey, can you just stay awake with me? Can you just stay awake for 1 hour? Each of you, could you just give me 1 hour and stay with me so I don't have to do this alone? And they all fall asleep because they're drunk, right? So they all fall asleep, and not one of them could wait an hour with him. So Maundy Thursday. I mean, it's so humbling because you'd want to say, like, I would be the person who'd stay the hour with Jesus, right? So you'd want to be that person, but then you think, well, would I, if I were drunk and full and I ate and I'm tired and I'd been walking all day, would I really be the person who, or because remember that they're not really taking him seriously. They don't really think that something bad's going to happen. They don't really believe that he's going to get crucified because he really didn't do anything wrong. So they're thinking, well, you're worrying about nothing. Somebody's going to come save us. And they're looking at the government, who's like, well, we don't want to kill this guy. And but they do kill him because the people want that. The people, are chanting that. But they're trying to wash their hands of it. They're trying to ignore what's going on. But but the apostles, his friends, these are his closest friends, and they don't take him seriously. So on Maundy Thursday, I didn't get to church because I was doing something else, so I couldn't get to church. But in my previous church that I grew up in, one of the things I loved that they did is they did a vigil overnight, and you could go in for an hour and pray. And they had St. Augustine prayer books, which has a beautiful self-reflection section in it. And I would always sign up for like the 2 o'clock in the morning slot because I was young, and a lot of the church members were old, so they didn't want to be driving at 2 in the morning. And I always found that to be probably one of my most favorite moments of the year because it's very not showy. It's something that you do yourself, and it's in that hour, boy, when you do that self-examination in the St. Augustine prayer book, holy smokes, I mean, it's thorough, I'll say that. So that used to be one of my favorite times of the year, and I think the new church that I belong to, they wash feet, which is also, something very humbling. Remember, because in the sand, in the desert, you wore sandals if you had shoes, and your feet were cruddy. And to have Jesus wash your feet, having, God wash your feet, such a humbling experience. So I wish I would have been able to attend that, but I unfortunately did not this year, but maybe next year. I'm sort of, if you're new to the channel, I have a complicated relationship with religion itself. I'm spiritual, have always been Christian, Celtic Christian, and celebrating both the Eightfold Wheel of the Celtic tradition and Christian holidays. But I used to be very religious, and got away from religion for a number of reasons. And one of them is just because I've seen as many of my friends who are not Christian have identified the cross being used to, bash them over the head for whatever particular issue or whatever is going on. And so the Good Friday service, I just absolutely loved. Our priest, Father John, his homily was about reclaiming the cross. And he had a big wooden cross there, and he put it out, and then you could go and you could honor that cross in any way you wanted. And I just thought that was a beautiful, beautiful thing, because the message that went with it was like the cross has been used for so many awful things in this world, right? And in the persecution of pagans and witches. My Scottish ancestors who were persecuted as witches, who were really just poor women living, trying to make a living making herbal medicine, they did nothing wrong. And really, when you look at the course of human history, dating all the way back to the crucifixion, people have used Jesus and used the cross as an excuse to be horrible to others. And I loved Father John's homily about reclaiming the cross and being, being the change, right? Being the change we want to see in this world. Like, if we want to reclaim the cross, we're the ones who are going to have to do it. We can't just use words and say, well, Jesus isn't like that. We have to show that as Christians, we're not out to hurt people. We're not out to judge people. We're not out to alienate people. We're not out to hurt people in any way. We have to be the ones who show, compassion and bring light and love to the table, because that's what Jesus did. Jesus, looking around, feeding people with loaves and fishes and healing the poor. One of my favorite stories from the Easter season is, things must have gotten really rough. This is mentioned in one of the Passions. Can't remember which one, because I'm not good at remembering which one is which. But anyway, things must have gotten rough, and there must have been some like fist fighting and violence and stuff and attacking. And a slave's ear got cut off, and Jesus is like, would you, all of you, cut it out. Stop this violence. This is nonsense. And there's just one line. He goes, he heals the slave. He goes and heals the slave whose ear is cut off. Now here's this guy who's walking to his death. People are, fighting. People are carrying on, and he's like, cut it out. And he heals this slave, this person who can literally do nothing for him. And he heals him, and he does this miracle. In the midst of all of this craziness, he heals the slave, and nobody notices that. Nobody notices that this poor slave whose ear has been cut off has been healed, by the Son of God, and it goes unnoticed, right? Except for the gospel writer who wrote it down. And I just feel like, that quiet, those quiet miracles that Jesus did, he wasn't doing them for show and tell. He was doing them because it was the right thing to do. And I feel like in our world, we want kudos and credit for all the good Christian things that we do. And then we want people to forget all the bad things that we do in the name of Christ. And there's Jesus, who could be like, look at me, I am healing this slave. Doesn't do that. He just does it because the slave needs his ear healed. And the end was the same for him anyway. And he knew that. He knew that it didn't matter if he did this miracle in the midst of all this chaos. Nobody was going to see it except for the one guy writing it down. And he did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. So I think that's a good message to us, to do the right things and be on the right side, and to reclaim the cross and bring peace into the world. And we do that by remembering that Easter is about rising again. It's rising out of the ashes. And I love, I mean, this is where they take away my church card. I personally feel that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. I have no proof of that, but I have more proof that he was than he wasn't, because Mary and Mary Magdalene were at the tomb. And they get there, and they thought it was robbed because, you know, the stone, this heavy, heavy stone was moved away, and the clothes were there, but he wasn't. And they thought, you know, and they're crying, and they're like, somebody stole him. And he was in a different form, because he says to them, like, why are you crying? And they're like, they stole our Lord. And you know, he says, you know, Mary, can you imagine? Can you imagine? I can't even imagine her expression, like, when she realized who it was. Because he calls her by name, Mary, you know, and, you know, it was him, right? And, I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have been like. But he was in a different form, right? He was not in the same human form. So was he a ghost? Was he a spirit? I have no idea. But he was in a different form that she couldn't recognize him right at first. But it was the women who were there. It wasn't the apostles. It wasn't the disciples, right? Who knows what they were doing? Maybe they were still drinking or being sad somewhere else, but they weren't there. And now it's true that, you know, culturally the women were the ones who took care of the graves, not too dissimilar to what we do today, you know, by, you know, going and taking care of things. But, you know, they weren't there, you know, grieving. They weren't around, right? It was the women who were around. It was women who realized that the Lord that rose. So, you know, he came, you know, he showed himself first to the women. And, he is risen. He is risen indeed, right? How awesome our God is, right? That our guy got to rise from the dead. Now, I know some people, my atheist friends, are like, it's a bunch of bullshit. That's right. You don't have to believe the same thing I believe for me to believe it. And it's okay. You can think of it as fantastic stories. That's okay too. Because even if you don't believe in the reality of it, I think the stories are good, right? Be a good friend. If somebody asks you to stay with them an hour, even if you think they're full of, you know, baloney, be that friend that stays the hour, right? Be the friend that washes the feet of a dirty traveler, right? If you can be. You know, be the person who represents all the good in the world. And don't use that goodness to bash people who are down, right? And then, you know, be a person who believes and a person who shows up even in the worst of times, right? Like, bring the light. So Easter is about bringing light. I am wishing you the happiest of Easters if you celebrate, and if not, I'm wishing you the happiest of Ostera, if that's what you celebrate. And if you celebrate nothing, I'm wishing you the happiest of that. I am wishing you all the best and light and love. Be well. Take care. Bye-bye.